Welcome to A Little Bit Radical, a business podcast from Standing on Giants. I'm Rob, your host. Join me as I meet people and organisations who are doing things differently, challenging the status quo and, yes, might just be a little bit radical.
My guest today says she would die on a mountain for diversity, equity and inclusion. Emma Locke is Change and Communications Lead at Perfetti Van Melle, the parent company of some of the world's favourite confectionery, including Mentos, personal favourite, Chupa Chups and Frutella, to name but a few. Today we're going to talk about what it takes to champion inclusion with a team of 18,000 employees across 39 operating companies. I met Emma a few months ago, and I promise you, she's full of surprises and inspiring initiatives. This is going to be a great conversation. Emma, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Rob. I am very much looking forward to talking to you today.
Great. So, Emma, if you are a little bit radical and you're on our podcast, so we know that you are, what in your early life set you up for that?
I think I have been quite a strong character, even as a child. I did grow up in a single-parent family. And was thrust a little bit earlier than perhaps many into some sort of adult decisions and some different ways of thinking, and the lifestyle that I had, I guess, was probably a bit more mature than I probably needed to be quite so early. So I think I grew up quite quickly. Although if you spoke with my mother, she would certainly say that as a child, I was fiercely independent and told her regularly I didn't need her help and I could do it myself at a very young age. So I think for me, it's a sort of innate, inbuilt piece, which has just grown, I think, as I've got older. I've always been one of those people who's been quite tenacious. I tend to get something in my head and off I go. And I say I'm going to do something and I do it. Hell or high water, I am there. And I think that has just been personality, really, and circumstance that I have grown up in. But I feel for me, that sort of strength has come from something far, far deeper than just my upbringing. I have a sibling, and her and I are two very different people. She's very different to me, but actually it's come from somewhere very deep. I think it's just part of me. And a friend from my primary school, her mother once said to me, "You're such a funny little cute kid. You were this sort of very sensitive yet very strong child." And that was a really nice reflection from her. And I always sort of think about her when somebody says, how do you describe yourself? Actually, probably quite sensitive, but actually quite strong as a person, which I think that is an interesting blend as you go through life. So quite like that description of me from somebody who's known me since I was 5 years old.
It sounds like you were set up to be the leader of a people and HR team from the start. Being sensitive and strong, that sounds like the perfect mix for leading a team like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think my core values are very much around people first, make them feel good, make them feel part of something. I want to feel part of something. I want to feel good. And I think that's very important as an employer to ensure that your team feel connected to what you're trying to do and they feel that they can contribute and they can be part of it. So for me, that sort of people first mentality is critical. I don't have people, don't have anything really as a business. So that does feel instinctively the right thing to do. So I'm very passionate that everyone who works at Perfetti Van Melle is able to be themselves, bring themselves to the organisation and contribute, because we all have very different paths to the table that we sit at, and those different paths have shaped us all. And I think we should encourage that people come into an organisation and be themselves. That makes them their best selves. So I'm a huge advocate of that.
Well, you'll sign me up to that for sure. I want to hear a few examples of your fiercely independent spirit from your younger days. What can you tell us about that?
I always loved cars and motorbikes, actually. I grew up with a parent who had previously been a professional driver. So I got taught to drive and loved it. And I wanted to ride a motorbike at 17 and was sort of told at 17, "You'll probably be dead within a week. Suggest you don't do that." And I sort of did take notice of that. And it probably would have been true, to be fair. So as an adult, maybe it was an early midlife crisis, I'm not entirely sure, but whatever it was fabulous. I took up some hobbies. I decided, right, I'm going to go and do something. I was working quite long hours, working quite hard. I was working at BP at the time and just needed to do something more than go to work. And I enjoyed what I was doing, but needed more. What I really want to do, I'm going to learn to ride a motorbike. So I did.
Fantastic.
And I thoroughly enjoyed it. And every time I said this to my friends, they were like, oh my God, Emma, just never sure quite what's going to come out of your mouth when you say you've got this idea. So I took up the gym again. I took up the flute again as an adult learner. And then I learned to ride a motorbike. Those are the three things that I'm going to do. And I did them. And I remember going to my theory test, due to the sort of licensing piece, you have to go and sit a theory test. Fine, no problem. This is quite easy. So I turn up pre-work, and this is days before COVID, when you sort of dress quite smartly, have my heels on, and it's dressed. And absolutely, I turned up to the test centre, and this little chap behind the sort of glass said, "And you're here to do what, madam? What do you say?" "Here to do my motorcycle theory test." He just looked me up and down and said, "Motorcycle?" "Yes, please. Yes, please." And I thoroughly enjoyed learning. And I learned there's often two of you with your instructor. And it was every single time I was with another gentleman rider. And I'd always get some great feedback from the instructor saying, "You're listening, you're doing really well, you ride really safely, you ride really confidently." So I'm just so nervous. I don't want to fall off this thing, right? I just really want to do this. And I remember being given their sort of motorbike. It was challenging, really challenging, thoroughly enjoyed it. And then, of course, passed my test, super excited, over the moon. And then, of course, again, buy myself a Triumph Bonneville T100 Black Edition, which is just beautiful. And anybody who knows anything about motorbikes will love that. But
that's a proper motorbike, isn't it?
It was a proper motorbike. It very much was a proper motorbike, and it was beautiful. And I love running it anyway. So I'm now looking for my next motorbike, which won't be quite so classic, but I'll be looking at a Triumph Tiger 600. So we'll see. But I just wanted the challenge. The freedom that the motorcycle riding actually gives you is something I wish you could bottle. If you could bottle that would be amazing. And that sort of sense of freedom. And I love the fact that I say to people, I've got a full motorcycle license, and I've had this really sort of quite powerful, amazing, beautiful piece of machinery. And those that know me would say, "Really? You do what?" And of course, people who don't know me are just completely blown away by it. And they're just like, "No." Yeah. So I just like the shock factor as well. It's nothing dreadful. It doesn't harm anybody else, but actually just say, "Yeah." And then, of course, quite often you get people go, "Oh, I've got a motorbike. I used to ride motorbikes as a sort of young man or something." And it's lovely. It's such a nice topic, actually. It has made me speak to lots of people that I wouldn't have necessarily spoken to in my life. It's opened up a whole different category of friends and connections. And I love that. And I was at the NEC the other day at the motorcycle show with two of my friends. And it's fabulous. It's such a community. It's such a lovely thing to do. So it has opened a world up that if you saw me, the perception of me would not be that I hang around with a bunch of people who don a lid and some motorcycle boots and go off for the weekend riding. So I quite like that. I quite like that sort of secret little side of me that not everybody gets to see. Obviously, more people will now know about it, but I just love that.
Quite a few people listen now, so a lot of people will know it about you before they meet. Do you remember that first time, that first ride after you'd passed, first solo ride on your Triumph?
I probably had the biggest smile and about a dozen flies in my teeth, I imagine. It was fabulous because it was me and this instructor by the name of Tony. He was just fabulous, really supportive, really lovely, completely helpful. And he said, you passed, Emma. I'm really proud of you. Well done. Thank you. And we just rode back. And I was like, I've got a full license. I can ride this properly. This is mine. I was so excited about what bike I was going to get. I couldn't wait to go and get it proper. I had a little sort of 125 prior to that, and I could not wait to get rid of this particular 125, get the big bike. But that, coming back from the test centre, honestly, nothing could have shattered the sort of euphoria that I felt doing that. It was such a big thing because, the bikes are heavy. It was quite a challenging thing to do. I learned quite a lot about looking after myself. If you're not in the right headspace, it's quite dangerous if you're not sort of well hydrated, well fueled personally. You really do need to look after yourself whilst riding. It's really important. So I sort of learned quite a lot about doing that, but also sort of actually looking after me as well through this process. So, and then that sense of freedom and just accelerating with this beautiful machine that sounds gorgeous and lovely. I mean, my 125, I think probably had less power than my hairdryer does. But, I've got a 900cc engine motorcycle that I was just in love with, so it was just this beautiful bond. But that's scary, exciting, exhilarating. I've just got on a roller coaster type feeling. I mean, honestly, it's the best It really is.
Sounds like it's not actually too dissimilar to being a leader in a business in many ways. You're handed the keys to this very powerful, sometimes unruly piece of machinery. Do you think that's fair, or is that a bit silly?
I think that's probably a good analogy sometimes. I mean, the sort of excitement of working for a business like, Perfetti Van Melle, it's probably quite similar actually with such a fabulous organisation that there is that excitement, there is that enjoyment. There's fewer sort of flies in my teeth generally, but...
that's good, yeah.
Which is good. Yeah, I mean, it's an exciting thing, actually, and some of the things that we are doing, and for me, particularly sort of in the D&I space, that feels exciting. It feels new and exhilarating. And yes, I mean, actually, there's huge similarities, actually. Well, I agree with that. I hadn't really thought about it that way. But yes, I love that. I love that analogy.
I think there's always room to inform our work with the things that we do outside of work. And it sounds like you've talked about how much you'd learned through going through that process. And you also dropped in that you'd picked up a musical instrument again as an adult. I know when we met before, you said that it was only this year that you passed your grade 8. I doubt that there's many people in your position, very senior within a business, leading a big team, who are putting that much kind of time and dedication into a hobby or, into their own learning. It's clearly important to you. Why is that? And what do you think it gives, you, and what does it give one almost to keep learning and keep developing?
I personally find it really refreshing to have something outside of work that is not work related, but I still want to develop myself in terms of my learning. I still need to keep the grey matter ticking over, but sometimes it's nice just to have a break from the day job. And I think that segregation allows my workspace to feel like work, and I feel very committed and very dedicated and I love what I do. But actually, it's nice to put that down and then go and do something else that maybe just stretches another muscle and it gives me something else to think about. I think also, as I've been an adult learner, I've really realised how I learn. I have a fantastic flute teacher, a lady called Samantha, who I absolutely adore. I've been very lucky to find her, and now she's stuck with me for life. But she has really understood how I learn, and that sort of positive reinforcement really, really works for me. We've all worked at places and people where they've maybe not been as positive, or they've maybe not sort of recognised what we've done. And that for me doesn't really help. I can beat myself up quite perfectly, thank you very much, if I've done something wrong, I've made a mistake, and I'm very reflective. And I don't need somebody else saying to me, well, that wasn't quite right. It's like, I know, thank you. So some of the sort of learning techniques, I think, have been really interesting. So I think it's allowed me to reflect on how I behave and how I operate and how I respond at work, how other people behave, operate and respond as well. And then I think that for me, I love my role, but sometimes I think I'd like to do something really, really creative. I mean, standing up in front of a bunch of people, we did a D&I webinar fairly recently, and it was that really exhilarating, nervous, sweaty, clammy, lovely thing that we were doing. It was very much the same thing with my sort of grade 8 flute exam, to which I was sweating through all of it. So there are lots of similarities there, and that want to do something and to do something well, that for me is a huge driver for me, whether I'm stood up. Yes, I am a bit nervous, but because I really want to impact people, because yes, I really want people to think differently. I want to make a difference for people. And then, when I'm performing, for example, I want people to believe in this and love what I'm doing and feel connected as well. So I think that difference I get through, the music and the learning has just really rounded me off, I think, as a person, and it's just given me a thing to focus on, to think about. It's a real break if I've had, if I've had a sort of stressful work week, then I go and pick the flute up and play it. It's a real stress relief as well. And I think that's really important, to allow people the space to have a sort of an out. Not every day is great. Week to week, fine, but occasionally things are stressful or difficult. And that outlet, I think, is incredibly important, and allowing myself that creative side to flow, I guess. And here's another bit of music as well. I think such a bonding, very personal, but equally it's a lovely thing you can share. So I love it, but it has really given me a lot of time to reflect in terms of how I am as a person, and then how people may respond to learning and development and growth opportunities. And I also love the fact I've inspired a couple of my friends' children to pick up various instruments. And even some of my adult friends have said, actually going to go and pick up the blah, 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 whatever. A friend of mine's picking up clarinet, actually, and another friend's doing some singing lessons. And I just think, how wonderful is that to inspire somebody else? So I'm doing I say, gosh, it's really hard. I really struggle with this learning some days. And there are some nights and sometimes I think, oh, I haven't got the time for this really, I've had a really long day. That actually makes me feel a lot better. So I think it's really important to not even indulge, but do the things that you enjoy for that sort of self-satisfaction and that sense of achievement, really.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm sure that's resonating with a lot of listeners. So I'll put it in the Q&A actually for all of you. I'd love to know what hobbies you've taken up outside of work and what they've given you in work. So you obviously like pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. What's the latest thing that you're doing, the new thing for Emma?
The new thing for me is the tattoo. I have decided I'm committing to the tattoo, and I slightly laugh.
Oh, wow.
Many people who meet me feel that I'm quite sort of traditional. I've done an HR role. I follow the rules, follow the procedures.
They don't know the flute playing, motorbike riding.
Tattooed.
Radical.
Hopefully.
Yeah, yeah, tattooed.
Absolutely. And I love challenging that stereotype. And I love when people assume things when I prove them wrong. And I love that because, that for me sort of plays into some of the D&I space that I work in. But I have decided the tattoo is in 2 weeks. I've got my tattoo artist and booked. The appointment is sorted. We are going. It is apparently going to be quite painful. I'm okay with that. I've prepped, I've done lots of research. I'm just doing it. I'm doing it for me. I'm not doing it for anybody else. But it feels like something I've toyed with for a long, long time. And now I've decided I'm old enough to know better, but also young enough to do it anyway. So that's sort of where my head is at the moment. And I'm in that space. Just do it. There's no harm to anybody else. No offense. It's nothing dreadful. No one will see it.
I was going to say there's tattoos and tattoos, aren't there, Emma?
Well, yeah. So are you going
for the neck? You going for the neck sleeve?
Full neck, yeah. I just think, why not now? And I think life is short, life is precious, and I love doing something that I think, gosh, I couldn't do that yesterday, or I didn't do that yesterday. I've learned something, I've gained something, I've done something different, I've pushed the comfort zone. I have this innate need to do that. And I think I've been doing that for a very long time. And of course, as you get older, those sorts of decisions have to be slightly more sensible, or maybe not. But yes, I'm going to rock my tattoo. And as I get much older, I'm going to be rocking the blue rinse and I'm going to be riding my motorcycle.
Amazing. Sounds like the dream. Yeah. I remember watching a program that David Dimbleby did. I think it was about pirates or about the Navy. And as part of the program, he got a tattoo because he was learning about the significance of tattoos. We're going back sort of hundreds of years, how important tattoos were in the Navy and with pirates. And I think he was in his 70s when he got his first tattoo, and he got a classic anchor on his arm, very inspiring. Well, when this episode comes out, you will have got your tattoo. So when we publish the episode, we'll be able to do the big reveal, what the tattoo was. I mean, no photo evidence needed, depending on where you're having it. We won't go there. I think we should move on to your work now. So tell us about Perfetti Van Melle and your work there in a nutshell.
It is a fabulous organisation. I really love it. I don't have an FMCG background. I did oil and gas and telecoms and then the NHS sort of for my career to date. And this was a real step change. And it's really different. The culture is wonderful. We have a wonderful MD by the name of Johnny Briscoe, who has been in the business 1 whole week less than I have. There's been some huge changes. And I love the fact that the business can make such a change. And you mentioned some of the products earlier on, but many of us would have had Chupa Chups as a kid. We've had some Mentos, chewing gum and mints. You would have had probably a Frutella, and you may have had a Smint. They're great products. They're fun products. The brands are fabulous. There's a huge amount of history. We're a growing business. It's really exciting. There's 60 people in the UK, and then we've got sort of 18,000 people across the globe. It's got such a lovely feel, and I've been able to be part of that culture and the shaping of that culture. And I've had a couple of people who, whether are working at Perfetti Van Melle now or have left, but they've said, Emma, you've had a real influence on the organisation. And I sort of don't really recognise that and realise that on the one hand, because that's just what I want to do. I want people to come to work and feel that they're part of the organisation and they can contribute and they enjoy it and they're loving it as much. But we've got some amazing sales teams, brand managers. I mean, everybody. I don't want to exclude anybody at all, but it's a lovely organisation. And actually, it has been somewhere that I do things, change things, and that's been so exciting to have that influence. And when you work at very big corporates, like I have done, it's very difficult. Like everything's in place. They've got all the policies, all the processes, and that doesn't make that bad. But actually I've been able to change things. Thoroughly enjoyed doing that. And it's been wonderful to see the journey that we're on. And, there's still lots to do, still lots to go after. But it's a fabulous organisation in terms of the culture as well. And I think I go in every day and feel really quite proud to be there. So I've been so very lucky. And selfishly, it's also 3 miles down the road from home, which is even better. But it's lovely. It's just a lovely, lovely
Not
place
to be
work.
underestimated.
No, absolutely not these days, Dan. Absolutely.
An easy commute. Well, let's talk about some of these changes that you've brought then. And I know that we started your intro with, this is what you're willing to die on a mountain for, as diversity, equity and inclusion. Tell us about the changes that you've brought about there, your company, and an insight into some of the programs that are up and running now.
When I started, there wasn't a huge amount around DE&I, and sort of said, gosh, what's the sort of policy or the sort of stance on this? And out of curiosity, really, because at BP, I had been one of the employee resource group leaders. So they had a number of employee resource groups, one of which was accessibility, which looked after individuals with disabilities. And I headed that up for a couple of years, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. It was sort of outside of my HR day job. And BP had, again, a big structure of all of these lovely employee resource groups. Fabulous. And then I came into Perfetti Van Melle, and I thought, gosh, there's a real space here that I can play into. I am a bilateral, so a 2 hearing aid wearer, and I have been for I think 15 or 16 years. I sort of lose count, but it hasn't actually been that long. I've always had some hearing concerns, picked up as a child through sort of one of these school medicals. And I went through quite a challenging time with the hearing loss. I woke up one day with a significant hearing loss. It just happened overnight. It was all very scary, all very frightening, actually. And I felt incredibly isolated.
Must have been really scary.
It was, actually. I'd always had the sort of the bad ear at school. That was, they sort of used to put me at the front of the classroom. I sat a certain side, and all of those things were sort of put in place to help me. And then as an adult, just woke up one day having lost sort of quite a lot of hearing in the good ear, which was now not the good ear. They were pretty sort of similar. And that was a huge shock. I hadn't done anything. It had just happened. And it's an ongoing saga, really. It's something I sort of have to deal with sort of fairly frequently. And the technology has changed an awful lot. And my hearing aids stream music straight into my ears now. And it's wonderful, very different to what it was a few years ago. But for me, I remember feeling quite isolated. My line manager at the time, I was working at a company called Friends International, and he was very good, very supportive. And they were very helpful. And just as an example, I had such terrible sort of dizzy spells and vertigo. I couldn't really stand up particularly well for a little while. And that dizziness continued, and I was advised not to drive. And work actually would pick me up from my house in Reading, and they would, put me in a taxi and take me to the office in Marlow, and they helped me with that so I could get to work. So they were very supportive. So little things like that was really helpful, and I'm very grateful. My Friends International was very sort of sales-based, quite a tough culture. But I was shown an awful lot of kindness and compassion. And I had quite a few weeks off work because I was just so unwell when it all happened. And I will never forget that, actually, in terms of the support. I've then experienced different reactions to my hearing, and that has been quite challenging. So when I came into Perfetti Van Melle, I really wanted to make sure that we included everybody, because I just remember feeling so, I can't describe how alone and how depressed I was for quite a long time. And actually just thought about it now, I think, oh God, I'm so glad I'm not there anymore. And I've got through that. It was incredibly challenging. And I sort of don't quite know how I did it. Again, it's inner strength I feel sometimes I just sort of get. So I feel quite passionate that if you were gay, trans, or from a different ethnic background, or a single parent, or senior female, whatever, and again, I don't want to exclude anybody here, but just as some examples and some sort of thoughts off the top of my head, I want everyone to come to work and say, yeah, I'm a single mom or single parent, or yes, I'm a gay man, or, and not have that be a barrier. I want people to come into work. So we've started putting in some great pieces of work for the D&I space. I've met a gorgeous, lovely colleague called Hector, and Hector and I very recently talked to the European Business Unit and did a big webinar across the business unit, which was, I think we have sort of 500 plus people.
Was this the sweaty one that you were saying? The big sweaty one?
Oh my goodness. I could not have been hotter. It was one of those horrible moments, and sort of Hector and I hugged at the end of it because it was the sort of the adrenaline was going. I was like, oh, quite hot. But thanks, And it was wonderful to do. We've been sort of implementing some awareness sessions with our general managers and our management teams across the OC. It's been fabulous. It's been such a journey, and we're making some progress, and we've got lots to do. We've got a group of ambassadors together. We'd like to do some employee resource groups. There's lots of things to get after, lots of work. And I think it's critical to provide safe space for individuals. I'm also really keen to ensure that there's lots of allyship as well. I'm not gay. I don't come from a different ethnic background. I'm a white female. So there are some things I don't understand and have no experience of, but that doesn't mean I can't be supportive. So I think these things are becoming really critical in day-to-day life, whether it's actually at work or outside of that. But I think, as an employer, as an HR professional, as a human being, I have a responsibility to hold open the door for other individuals to come and, contribute. And you can't contribute if you have to hide half of yourself. I can't contribute if I don't have my hearing aids in. I can't contribute if I can't sit in a certain area. Actually, my colleague the other day said, "Oh, you can't hear me, can you?" I'm mumbling, "No." And, that was very sweet. There was a recognition. I really can't hear you, and kindly just speak up a little bit. So, these adjustments don't have to be huge. They don't have to be massive, but they have to be human, and they have to help that person. And I'm a huge advocate for sort of disability awareness, particularly around the hearing side, because I understand it. And I've met lots of friends and colleagues sort of over my journey who've got worse hearing loss. And I spoke to a friend of a friend the other day, actually. She's going through quite some challenges. I just think if I could share that and help, great. But I don't have knowledge of all of the different sort of diversity issues that we're facing. That's why we're trying to pull together some ambassadors as some groups, because many minds and many heads are far better than just mine. And I think it's really exciting. I think it's a really important part of a business. It's not, in my opinion, a nice to have. It's a critical. It's something that makes absolute commercial sense and should be sort of integrated and embedded and intrinsic to every business, however big or however small that you are.
Completely agree, Emma, of course, not surprisingly, but a lot of what you were saying was resonating. And I think one of the barriers you were alluding to there, which is when you're in the privileged position as well, one of the barriers to being an ally is feeling that you have to know everything about everything. Actually, we had another guest called Paul Smith, who works for a brilliant organization called Jack, which is a fantastic well-being platform and also helps educate people around DE&I issues as well. And he said those exact words, no one can know everything about everything. It's impossible. And you have a deep experience of what hearing loss means. And another person that you're bringing into this program will have deep experience of something else. And it's so important to just be vulnerable enough to say that you don't know, right? And the safe space term, again, gets a bit kind of woke washed, which is a real shame, because the point is it's about being safe to ask a stupid question, and not feel
absolutely
lambasted about it, right?
Yeah, and there's no stupid question, and I think it's really important to leave that open. I remember feeling incredibly embarrassed. I felt awkward. I got these horrible hearing aids. I felt awkward. I'm sure other people felt awkward, but for different reasons. And actually, I'd hate to think that somebody couldn't speak up. And the reason I say, "Oh, actually, hearing aids, please speak to me," I just think, it's part of me. I can't hide it. Well, I can hide it. But why should I? And I wouldn't expect someone else.
Why should you is the real question. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think it's very important. I think safe space, whatever you'd like to call it, I think it's important to provide that and whatever sort of guise it takes. But I'm really keen to ensure that I speak up about things these days because, the experience I had was really quite challenging, and I would not want somebody else to go through that.
We've spoken to Daniele, who runs Token Man, which is all around encouraging mostly white male allyship on issues of DE&I. And he's rebranded them as brave spaces for for us blokes that don't want to go into a safe space. We're going to go into a brave space. If it works, it works. But I think let's stick on allyship. And I think the other reason that you as a leader can't be expected to know everything about everything is that the DE&I space is evolving so quickly, isn't it? And then there are more and more areas that we have to take into account. I know that one area that, again, you've been working on is the menopause. Actually, at the time of recording, we're recording in December, and LinkedIn have published in their 15 big ideas for 2024 that looking after women going through the menopause is going to be absolutely key to retention. And the winning companies will build programs around the menopause. And they highlighted as well the importance of male allyship in that as well. So could you tell us a little bit about the menopause approach at Perfetti Van Melle and what you've done there?
Absolutely. It's an interesting topic, isn't it? Because women have been going through menopause since the dawn of time, yet we're in 2023, careering very quickly into 2024.
And we've suddenly discovered it. Yeah.
And
it feels like we've just discovered it, right?
Yes. There's all these women who are having this weird thing called the menopause. And isn't that taboo? No, to be able to do that. I'm sort of shocked and I'm sort of surprised, but I'm also at an age where maybe this is more of a thing for me. So I think that probably has helped. But equally, I've seen an awful lot of colleagues and friends. I've got friends of all sorts of ages and backgrounds, and I think that's fabulous and wonderful. But I've certainly seen some friends really struggle through that and, don't really understand it. And I think even medically, people aren't necessarily recognising it as brilliantly as they can. And we've put in a policy, we've done some awareness sessions at Perfetti Van Melle. And somebody said to me that, this is just about women, right? And only of a certain age. The reason we're doing this is actually I've got an awful lot of colleagues here. Many of my female colleagues are married to men or other women. And then many of my male colleagues have got wives and girlfriends and mums and daughters and whatever. Actually, it impacts at family level. And one of my colleagues very kindly shared with us one day that his wife had been incredibly depressed, had gone to the doctors, was told that she was depressed. I don't feel I'm really depressed, but something's going on right now. But, I've got that very low mood. And eventually they discovered that actually she was going through the menopause. So it's taken a little while. And this male colleague had shared this. Of course, it's really brave to share that because it's quite personal. But he felt quite impacted by the roller coaster that his wife had been on, and that impacts him. So I think for me, this, policy about women of a certain age, so maybe half your population at a certain age bracket, that's only a few people, right? We've got an organisation of 60. So how many does that impact? 3? I don't know. As a stab, who knows? No, it doesn't. It impacts all of us because all of us have got a female friend, colleague, connection, relative that will at some point have been through this or will be going through this. And I think there's more that we can do here. And I sort of chuckle as I carry around my personal fan for this sort of hot moments. We were laughing actually being out one day. I was like, it's fine, I've got my fan, here we go. Whip it out of my handbag and it's quite useful. But little things like that, again, it's really important. Is sort of the office setup, how you operate, allowing people the space or the breaks. All of those things should be permitted and allowed. And I think it's incredible that we see the menopause as such a taboo. We're talking about sort of menstrual cycles and maybe all the icky, ugly things that we don't really want to talk about. And I understand that, but it's reality and it happens and it has a huge impact on a part of the workforce that have been at work for a little while. You still have huge valuable contribution to make. And why should we ignore them? Again, I feel quite passionate that was not just about a few ladies. It was about everybody. And that for me is very much the rhetoric and the message that I try and promote, that, these things impact on a much broader scale. Now, I understand also that not everyone will get behind that sentiment, but I'm changing minds one at a time, and I will continue to do so. And I think when another colleague came to me and said, you're right, Emma, I've got my wife at home and actually maybe she's in that space at the moment. I was like, good, I've made you think differently. That is the point. There's lots of help. We partner with Grocery Aid, for example. We've got a great sort of set of benefits. So we've got sort of lots of support through Bupa. They offer some menopause support. There's lots of things available and out there. And again, I'm by no means an expert on the menopause. I'm sure my own journey will be different to the next lady. But I do think, if we can as an employer signpost and offer support, whether that is to the ladies that are going through that or our male colleagues who may be experiencing that because they've got a loved one that is going through that, then brilliant. Let's not make it a horrible thing to talk about. So I don't want someone saying menopause and then sort of pull a face. It is part of life. We celebrate people having babies or getting married or whatever other life events. It just happens to be another life event. And part of me says it almost should be celebrated. It's amazing you've got that far in Your body's doing, body's doing what it should be. I'm very keen to ensure that it's not perceived as a sort of a woman's only thing, but it should be supported by everybody in an organisation, because it does have a much bigger impact than perhaps people really give credit to.
Completely. It's a great example of the simple step you can take, I think, with all D&I related issues, which is just giving your team the language to talk about it and the psychological safety to talk about it. Being able to say, I'm sorry, today I've got brain fog because I'm going through the menopause, completely changes the context of the conversation with your colleagues and in a particular project or whatever. And the same goes for mental health. I say, I'm having a bout of poor mental health at the moment. I've got to take the day off today, that kind of thing. And even just giving your team that is very, very powerful. Do you agree?
Absolutely. I think that's the purpose of it now. All of us won't all get it right all of the time. But having that conversation and being able to say, I'm not sure, or, how can I phrase this, or what do you need, or just tabling some of those concerns, I think is incredibly powerful. Be brave and say something with a view that, there may be some actually, well, that's not what we call it, or that's not quite how it works, or that's not how I would view this, but let's have a debate. And I think that healthy conversation is where we need to start. So absolutely, somebody saying, do you know, I'm having a really bad day today because of whatever's going on. Again, it's completely normalising some of the things that many of us will, or all of us will go through. So I'm a big advocate of that, absolutely.
The more and more I learn about this, and the more leaders like you I speak to, the more ridiculous I find it that we pretend that these things don't exist within the walls of our workspace.
I know.
I
know. Yeah, agree.
We must move on, Emma. So let's turn your attention to the world now. What's a kind of change for the world at large that perhaps you don't impact on a daily basis that you would like everyone to get behind?
I've thought about this quite a lot, actually. And it's something really simple. And for me, it's so fundamentally the right thing, feels the right thing to do. And I think for me, it's the kindness and compassion and care you should show to people day to day. And just a very quick example, I was on a train with a colleague going from Amsterdam to Breda. So my Dutch is appalling. I can say thank you, and that's about it. But there was an older gentleman sat opposite me, had a hanky with a cup finger, and he was sort of playing with a bleeding finger. And I thought, oh gosh, I'm not sure that hanky's terribly clean. I just want to just sort of make him feel a bit better. So get up and circle around my suitcase. I'm one of these ladies who always carries stuff with me, very well prepared, she probably gathered, and gave him a plaster. Of course, I went through the, should I have given him that because he might be allergic? Well, sure, he's fine. He doesn't speak any English. I don't speak any Dutch. And I gave him a plaster, and he seemed very grateful. He put it on. It was all good. He sort of nodded and sort of obviously said thank you as he got off the train. I feel quite strongly that you can impact people. We never know quite what's going on in somebody's life. We all go through some sort of trauma or something in our lives, unfortunately. And you never really know what bad day somebody's having. It's really important to be kind and just to listen, actually, just to listen to where people are, understand sort of where people are and create that environment where people can and say, look, I am just having a bad day. I'm ever so sorry, for whatever reason, the cat died, whatever. People will always remember how you made them feel. They will not remember that you were the CEO of blah, blah, blah. They will not remember that you were the lady or the gentleman that cleaned the toilets in the station. But they will remember how you made them feel. And I think that, for me, is really critical. And we can do that at work, at the pub, with our friends, out and about, day to day. I think with that sort of kindness and that understanding, we would create a much better space and a much better world. And, we see all sorts of horrible things going on day to day. And I just think, why would you want to contribute to that? Watch lots of sort of podcasts on this in terms of, actually sort of the more evolved human beings tend to be kinder, because actually that's what, that aggression is sort of a survival thing. Actually, by being kind, it's sort of going beyond the survival mechanism that we have. So I'm a big advocate of that, leave people feeling whatever, a nice feeling. They will remember that. They might not remember your name, how much you earned, who you were, but they'll say, oh, I had that person who did this for me. I think that's incredibly powerful. And I wish that everybody could just think about that day to day and just remind themselves when they're getting a bit cross because the coffee order hasn't been quite right. There's the person at Starbucks hands over the wrong coffee, but maybe that person behind the counter is having a bad day too. That feels like something I'd love to sprinkle across the whole world. It would be a much better place.
I think so. I think that's a very inspiring point to end our conversation, Emma. It's been fantastic to speak to you. I hope you've enjoyed yourself.
I very much have, Rob. Thank you.
Great, no problem. Hope to speak to you again soon.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it, please follow us on your podcast platform. If you'd like to appear on A Little Bit Radical or have an idea of someone we should speak to, please email podcast@standingongiants.com or get in touch with me on LinkedIn. You can search Rob Fawkes or search Standing on Giants and you'll find me there. Thank you very much and speak to you next time.